Welcome back to Expert Talks, powered by InnoVint. Today, in this episode, we're diving into a topic that touches every winery, whether you make 2,000 cases or 200,000 cases. And that is how to align what you produce with what you can actually sell, or more commonly referred to as supply and demand alignment. If you've ever run out of your most popular wine mid-season, or if you feel like you're stuck with pallets of inventory that you can't move, you've experienced what happens when supply and demand aren't matching up. So the question is, how do you fix that? How do you build a process that gives you confidence that you're making the right wines in the right volumes to meet your customers' needs? To help us break this down, I'm joined by Andrea Savaiano, who has led DTC strategy for Duckhorn, Kosta Browne, DuMOL, just to name a few. She's breaking down supply and demand alignment for winery managers in an approachable, repeatable, and impactful way. Andrea, thank you for being here.
Thanks, Lauren. I'm happy to be here. I love this topic because, as you said, it's something that every winery deals with, but not everybody has a clear plan for. And once you put a process in place, it can completely transform the way you run your business with confidence and a sustainable growth plan.
Yeah, I'm sure. And it's something that's super top of mind right now and aligns well with kind of the state of the industry that we're in, right? Well, before we really dive into the topic, let's start with you giving us a brief background on your journey and how you ended up as the supply and demand expert.
Great. Yes, thank you. So I started my career as a business analyst at Premier Pacific Vineyards, a vineyard development company here in Napa. And that was my first entry into the wine industry. But I also grew up in the Willamette Valley and then went to college at Whitman College in Walla Walla, Washington. So never been far from wine country. After 2 years at PPV, I moved on and worked in San Francisco for tech companies in the renewable energy and agriculture spaces. And my roles there were focused on sales operations, sales analytics, and sales strategy. So I was really getting deep into data and leveraging data to help leaders make decisions, and really found a passion for making data useful for folks. So after 6 years in tech, my husband and I took a quick break to travel. And when we returned, we really decided we wanted to be back in wine country. So at that point, I landed at Kosta Browne in 2018 and worked with the team there to steward the industry leading allocation model into Duckhorn's leadership. After a couple of years at Duckhorn, I then moved on to DuMOL. And at DuMOL, I was leading the direct-to-consumer and marketing teams, where we grew sales by 45% over 3 years and increased our customers by 35%. But one of the most impactful projects that I got to be involved in at DuMOL is exactly what we're talking about today. We created a process for aligning supply and demand that really changed the way we function as a team and as a business. In 2024, I moved on from DuMOL, and I'm now running my own small wine brand with my husband, and also leveraging my career experience to consult for wineries on data analytics, sustainable growth planning, and DTC strategy.
That's amazing. So impressive. What a great background. I'm so excited to have you here today. And let's get into the topic. Let's start with the obvious question. Why does supply and demand alignment matter so much? And why should a small or mid-sized winery care about this?
Absolutely, Lauren. It's a great question. A lot of people think supply and demand planning is only for big wineries with 500,000 cases or more. But honestly, the stakes are even higher for smaller and mid-sized wineries because of the cash implications and the options for moving excess inventory. So if you only are making 5,000 or 10,000 cases a year, making too much of the wrong thing or not enough of the right thing can really tie up a lot of cash or potentially frustrate your customers when you don't have the wine they want. So you're either leaving money on the table or missing out on the opportunity to have quicker cash flow and be able to invest in other things in your business, such as marketing or sales or quality driven measures to make better wine. So with a small winery, you can't just always hold it to next year or put more dollars into marketing. When you can align your supply and demand really well, you can move forward with confidence with both the data and the process, know that yes, I'm producing exactly what I can sell, and I am going to sell exactly what I make.
I love that framing, having the confidence behind what you're producing and what you're going to sell. I'm sure it just builds better morale and trickles down throughout the entire winery. Let's get practical. If I'm a winery owner listening to this and I want to start aligning my supply and demand, where do I even begin? What steps do I make? How do I, get started right after I finish listening to this episode of Expert Talks?
Yeah, absolutely. The great thing about this is that you can get started right away. You don't need to invest in new tools or technology in order to be able to get this done. So there's a six-step process that I would follow, and with any winery who wants to get started on this project. So the first is to set your time horizon. Ideally, you're looking about 3 to 5 years out. 3 vintage years is really, as you know, 5 to 6 sales year. So that's a great starting point. And when you're operating in that time frame, either 3 years on the production or 5 to 6 years for the sales team, you can actually make material change in that time frame. So it's a really great place to start where you can leverage up your production or down your production. You can invest in sales channels. You can update your pricing. You can still do a lot of things to make change within that time frame. The next step then is to pull all of your supply and demand data. So for supply, think of every source of wine that you would currently have or will have to sell during that time horizon. So that includes all case goods inventory, all wine that's in barrel or tank, and all vineyard contracts or estate vineyards that will be producing and that you will harvest from, and their expected yields. Ideally, you can translate all of that into 9 liter equivalent cases so that everything is apples to apples.
And you're saying between the 3 and 5 year time frame that you just outlined.
Exactly. Yep. So
Okay.
everything that you have in case goods now, in tank or in barrel now, and everything that you will produce on that 3 year out horizon. So the
Got it.
projections are definitely the hardest part of this, but I will say this is about direction, not perfection. So if we
Hmm.
can really focus more on getting something out, it does not have to be perfect. Any number will get you directionally closer than where you are today.
I'm sure.
And that is especially true of your sales numbers. So for demand, because I think as much as we can't control agriculture, we also can't control consumer trends. And so there's uncertainty on both sides. For demand, you'll want to look at your sales history by SKU and by channel, and then also use that to project out your sales for the duration of the time horizon. And so remember, that's going to be even further out than your vintage productions because you'll be selling that 2028 vintage in 2030 potentially, or even 2031. So don't overthink the forecast.
Mhm.
But this is also a great time to bring in your sales leaders and your production leaders to help with the planning and the projections so that they are bought in on what those numbers are and they can help inform what the projections are and just become part of this process because one of the keys to success is the collaboration.
I'm sure, yeah. Okay, what's step number 3?
Step number 3 is to map your supply and demand. So this is the really fun part where everything comes together. You're laying out your projected yields and your projections by SKU, and then layering on the expected sales. So this will show you where do you have too much, where are you short, and it might be different year over year and channel by channel. But the real value here is being able to make those adjustments so you can see some of the things you may be able to address just in the planning of having the numbers all on the same page. And then some things you'll need to make a bigger plan for. So that takes us to step number 4. Step 4 is to create an action plan. So once you know where your supply is long or short relative to your demand, then you bring your team together to review and assess the situation. So you'll need input from winemaking, from sales, from anyone in the leadership team. No single person has the full picture here, and there's no one size fits all solution. So every winery will have different levers to pull based on whether they need to increase demand, increase supply, or decrease on either side. And there's so many ways you can do it. As I mentioned, channel shifting, you can also adjust price to influence demand. So that problem solving really has to be unique to each winery, and it'll be more powerful the more people you get in the room.
Creating an action plan is so important. You can do all this planning and you can think about your supply and demand and forecast, but how do you actually put it into action? So, what's step 5?
5 is just that. So we're creating accountability around that action plan. We need to have one point person who is responsible for making sure that not only do those actions get completed and seen through, but also that the results showed up the way we thought they would. So for example, if one of the action items is to develop a corporate gift strategy, that's great. And so somebody probably in your direct to consumer or marketing team is going to go build a corporate gift plan. Now, the real question is, how much can you sell with that plan? And so if your target was, let's just say 100 cases, and you sell 200, now you have to go back and reincorporate that into your supply plan to make sure that you have that excess inventory. Or if on the other hand, it falls short and you need to find some other sales strategies, other sales channels that you can explore, that's what the power of the accountability and having one person who's really on point can help make sure that you have that feedback loop and that that information is coming back around so that the plan stays in place. And
Yeah.
without this critical step of accountability, you really just have another pretty spreadsheet and a process that kind of gets swept under the rug.
Yeah, I'm sure. And just from your point of view, who should own that accountability? Is it multiple people? Is it you as an outside consultant? Like where does this live? And how do you make sure that within your organization, it is the best person possible?
That's a great question. And I think you hit the nail on the head there when you just said it's the best person possible. So I don't think this is specific to role. I think this is about personality and organization and culture.
Mm.
So it's going to be dependent on each winery. Some wineries probably have that role already. Maybe it's the GM, maybe it's somebody in marketing, maybe it's somebody in production, or maybe it is an outside consultant. I'm always happy to support wineries with things like that. Sometimes having somebody outside can help so that everybody inside can stay friendly while one person is cracking the whip from out. Um,
Yeah.
but you know, again, that's going to be dependent on the winery and the folks there, and how they work together and what makes sense for each team.
Mhm.
And the last step here, step 6, is another key piece of accountability and making sure that this process doesn't just get swept under the rug, and that's to revisit annually. So the first time is always the hardest because you're building everything from scratch. You've never done this before. I mean, that's true of almost anything we do. First
Yeah.
time is going to be the hardest. But once you've done it once, it gets so much easier because you already have your baseline data. You're only revising those projections and adding one more new year. And then you've also already started making progress on aligning your supply and demand. So your action item list is probably shorter. You have fewer supply and demand gaps. And altogether, it's going to be a quicker process. And I'll add to that one of the ways that we were able to make this successful at DuMOL was to make sure that we found a time in the year that worked for everybody. So obviously you
Mm.
wouldn't expect your production leaders to participate in this process during harvest. So for us, that sweet spot was March through May, where the sales teams had some capacity, the production team wasn't too busy, and we were able to all come together and collaborate in real time.
That's a great insight right there. Think about the seasonality. We work in such a seasonal industry, so making sure we have capacity when things like this are on our plate. The entire list sounds super approachable, though. Thank you for laying it out like that. And I'm taking that it's not about building some giant overarching forecasting model that's like super heavy and clunky. It's about clarity, consistency. I mean, you said it yourself, transparency, and just using the data that we all have at our fingertips these days.
Exactly. Keep it simple. It does not have to be complicated, and it's about direction, not perfection. So the point is to get the numbers on the page and see how they look, and you can always improve them, refine them in the future. But this is about the 80/20 rule because we can't predict what's going to happen. So we know the projections are wrong, but the thing with a good forecast, you know it's wrong, but is it useful?
Yes. Oh, the 80/20 rule. I try to live and die by that. You mentioned Excel, which I'm sure many folks are familiar with, but I'm curious, what are some of the other practical tools that you would recommend that wineries use when creating this?
Absolutely. So I really believe that Excel and Google Sheets are all you need for this. And I want to make that point clear so that nobody feels a barrier to starting on this process because they can't invest or don't have either the time or the funds to invest in a new tool right now. This does not require new tools. However, if you have inventory management systems or accounting software that offer some of this functionality or that allow you to do the sales projections or the supply planning, absolutely leverage the tools you have and put that information, pull the information from those tools into your spreadsheet. And you can add a couple of charts or things to make it visually interesting and help more clearly display where there are gaps. But otherwise, you don't need anything different. Though I've heard that InnoVint recently launched a new product that actually solves this problem. Is that right?
Yes, you are right. InnoVint recently launched a new product called Supply, and Supply is, I don't mean to do a shameless plug right now, but Supply is really focused on case goods inventory management, and If you want to learn more about that, reach out to us. Check it out on our website.
I've always heard of InnoVint as a great tool for the seller, but I've been so interested to hear more about the tools that InnoVint has built for holistic winery management outside of the sellers, like the cost accounting and inventory management, because those are such important things for folks who want sustainable growth for their winery. And to have the wine industry specific tools is invaluable.
Yes, definitely. So let's talk about what makes this work in practice. What separates the wineries who do this successfully and those who aren't doing this at all, or maybe are struggling to have like a clear view on this?
Yeah, certainly. So there are a few things that really matter in having a successful run of this process. I would say the first is stakeholder buy-in. So I talked about this earlier with, I think, steps 2 and 4, that you need to have your team at the table as you're projecting and developing an action plan, because you cannot do this alone. This cannot be a siloed effort. And you'll have the best outcome with the most creative and holistic solutions if you have your whole team participating. And I don't mean every person at the winery, but a key stakeholder from each department, so that you get a representative perspective. The second step is, as we talked about earlier, accountability. So somebody has to own the process, and not just the process, but also the completion of the action items. And again, that needs to be the right person at the winery, wherever they sit. I think everyone can think of the person at the winery who's going to make sure that everyone is in line and getting things done. So figure out who that person is for you and give them the opportunity to lead this process. In addition to stakeholder buy-in and accountability, consistency is another key to success. So revisiting this plan every year and making it part of your rhythm and part of your business operations. So link it in with your annual planning and budget process. Make sure you find that time of year that everyone can actually engage, and really make sure that it becomes something that you're constantly reviewing and revising. The last thing that I would suggest as a key for success in this process is transparency. So making sure that everybody has access and visibility into the information that you're reviewing and sharing. And that way, more people outside of even just the small group who's working on this can have some visibility into what the winery is focused on, how the winery is doing holistically, and be able to direct their own efforts in support of these needs.
Those are great. Simple 4 steps for success. I love the way that you've broken all of this down. It's very digestible. So, when a winery puts this into place, what are they actually looking to gain? What is your experience with that?
Yeah, the payoff is huge. You get a clear view of where you're long or short by varietal and SKU. So then you can strategize how to sell your inventory on hand, and you can make smart data-driven decisions for the future. Do we double down on a sales initiative? Do we pull back on a vineyard contract? Are we investing in a new sales channel? Are we changing our pricing? And that clarity is so powerful. I also want to point out that this process can work well for supply or demand-driven wineries. And what I mean by that, some wineries are very production driven, so making all decisions solely in pursuit of perfection of their craft, quality first. And other wineries, while also focused on quality, are more marketing driven. They're making decisions based on consumer trends and demand. And in either case, this process is bringing both sides, supply and demand, to the table to collaborate. But it does not alter the winery's philosophy or direction holistically. You continue on being production driven or marketing driven, but you have this new information. And the real win here is that you're producing only what you're confident you can sell. And that confidence changes everything for how you run your business. And it sets you on a sustainable path for growth. And also frees up your cash and allows you to make smart investments in things that are going to be able to move your business forward, as opposed to simply being held up in inventory that you may or may not be able to sell. So again, having that confidence to really know that you are able to sell what you make is going to be huge, and give a lot of the winery leaders more sleep at night.
100%. Thank you so much. That was such a great overall approach to understanding your supply and demand alignment. So, Andrea, if you could leave us with 1 to 2 action items, I know you gave us a lot, but if you could leave us with 1 to 2 action items that winery leaders can do today that would start to improve their supply and demand alignment, what would those be?
Definitely. So the first thing I would suggest is do a very mini version of the process we just talked through. Start with 2 or 3 SKUs, map out the current inventory levels against your sales velocity. You don't need to tackle everything at once. Just focus on your biggest movers and even just looking at one vintage to see where you stand right now. And that does two things. One, it gives you probably, as we were saying, 80/20, gives you most of the information you need here. And then also gives you some momentum. It shows you what's possible and how to get started with this. So once you've done a couple of SKUs, you kind of have a plan and a system in place, and you can move forward with more momentum. The other action I would recommend today, especially as we're getting into end of year, O&D, is to look at your aging inventory and make a plan. Sell, hold, or dump. It's costing you in storage fees and headspace to hold on to it. If you have sales potential for it in the future, that's great. Hold on to that, make a plan, build a strategy, figure that out. But if you're only holding on to it with the hope of maybe someday having an opportunity to sell, figure out what the right plan is instead and consider dumping it, handing it out to employees, great holiday gifts. Figure out what makes sense for your winery, your business. But to hold on to aging inventory without a plan isn't helping you or serving your winery or your cash flow.
Well said. Thank you for that. And I think you've shown that supply and demand alignment isn't just for the big guys. We sometimes I think we get in a mindset of, oh, that's not for me. We're small. We only make X amount of cases a year. But it's really a tool that any winery can use and should use to be running a smarter, leaner, and more confident operation. And for those listening, remember the first time you do this will be the hardest. I know you said that earlier, but I just want to repeat that again because, gosh, if I had that mindset with everything that I do, I think I'd give myself a little bit more grace. So it does get easier. And, once you start, you'll never go back. Thank you again, Andrea. And I really, really appreciated your time and your attention to detail in this episode. I love talking to people like you who are true experts in their field.
Thank you for having me, Lauren. It was really nice to be here today. And I hope that your audience gets great value out of this. I would love to hear stories of where people are able to implement any of steps and hear how it goes.
Yes, I love that. People can connect with you on LinkedIn. That will be linked in the show notes and on our web hub. And don't forget to like, share, subscribe to Expert Talks on your favorite platform. Thank you for tuning in to another episode of Expert Talks powered by InnoVint. And until next time, cheers.